All right, we're troubleshooting a Dungeons and Dragons. The customer has an LE. I'm going to use my premium for the example because functionally the premium is going to be the same for what we're doing. The first question is the right return lane on his does not register. And then the second question is when he goes into the dungeon, it ejects a second ball, which is pretty unusual. And so we're going to go through this systematically. These two problems may or may not be linked depending on what we find. So let's look thoroughly at both of them in case there's something that explains both issues. So let's start with the right return lane. He already did some switch tests, but let's just show you what mine does. So I'm gonna enter the menu, go to diagnostics, switch test. I'm going to press down on this switch. And it highlights the switch and it's called number 5 right return lane. You also see it gives you extra information which could come in handy. It gives the wire colors and the connections. I'm also going to be referring to the manual. And just so you can see up close, this is how far I'm pushing it down. Mine registers pretty quickly. I don't have to push it very far. Now the customer did say he got his pin snake caught on it and the actuator got bent at some point, so that's likely what contributed to the problem, but we're going to look at this thoroughly just in case, since we also have this other interesting problem going on with the dungeon. So next, let's lift the playfield. You can go ahead and turn the game off for safety here. When you lift the playfield, don't forget to take the balls out. On Dungeons and Dragons Premium LE, there's 5 in the trough. There are up to 3 that get stored in the dragon. You can leave those there if you want to. That's what I usually end up doing. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and lift the playfield. You'll hear the balls roll, but they tend to stay in that dragon trough. And lean the playfield back like this. First of all, here's what our right return lane or inlane switch looks like. It's the one right here. He already showed me this, but just to verify, the middle lug of the switch has a green wire with a yellow stripe on it, and the back lug has 2 black wires with orange stripes. So those 2 wires should touch each other, and they should be soldered to the lug on the switch, just like mine. They shouldn't easily pull off. And there should be nothing attached to this lug right here. Next, I'll show you, I'm going to push the switch from the top side with my finger. This is what ours looks like in the starting position. So you'll notice the wire actuator is between these 2 red pegs here. The other end sits like this. And this is what it looks like when I push it up and down. It's important that the switch clicks. This is a micro switch. And when you activate it, you should hear a click. The machine is turned off. Listen carefully. If you don't hear the click, the switch is not going to work. So in this case, if the customer needs a new switch, that's fine. If it just needs to be bent differently, that's fine too. Hopefully seeing mine will help to verify that the switch itself and the wiring going to the switch looks correct. For this case, I think it's worth scrutinizing the wiring a little bit further since we have some odd problems here and it looks like the wires were attached to a switch, but please verify that they're attached in the correct place. What I've found on switches not working on a stern game, if it's not the obvious, if it's not the switch itself and the wiring going to the switch, you need to look down the chain a little bit. There are multiple switches that share the same wires. So sometimes you can find a wire that's popped off on a different switch and it affects the switch in the chain that you're having the issues with. So let's look at those together. I have the switch reference page open on the manual, which is available online. And so you'll notice the right return lane uses black orange as the ground wire. And that's the wire that's going to be shared amongst multiple switches. So that's what we're going to look at. So let's look at every switch that uses black orange, and we're going to start with left outlane. Looking at left outlane, you see that black with orange wire. Make sure you can pull on each wire and it doesn't easily come off. They should be touching each other and soldered to the lug. This one looks correct. Let's see what's next. Left return lane, black and orange. So here's our left return lane. And this is where it's probably helpful to see what mine looks like so you can verify. So mine only has one black with orange, but mine is working correctly. So that may be the end of the chain. That may be why there's not two black with oranges there. This looks correct. Next is the right return lane, which is the first one we checked. So I'm gonna skip that for right now. Next is the right out lane. So let's check that one. I think this is gonna be an important one to verify. So here's the right out lane. Here's the black with orange. Make sure both wires are attached. They can't pull off. They're touching each other and they're touching the lug. Since the customer is getting this multi-ball effect when he goes into the dungeon, one theory I have is that the vibration is triggering a switch somewhere else that's causing it to launch out another ball. And on Dungeons and Dragons, or most games from this era, if you trigger the outlane switch, it's gonna go ahead and launch another ball, especially if the ball save is on. So I could see how if a wire has come loose and then it's the vibration is momentarily causing the wire to make contact to something like the outlane switch, it could trigger odd behavior like that where it's ejecting another ball. So look at this one carefully. Let's see what other wires or whatever other switches use black and orange. So that was right out lane, and they're not all adjacent in the manual, so keep looking. Here's our next one, shooter lane upper. Let's look at that one. So the shooter lane comes down here. This is the upper switch in the shooter lane. If you're doing this on your own and you're not sure where switches are located, you can use the manual. There's a diagram. There's also a diagram on the screen during switch test. So here's the black with orange wire. Make sure those are attached. The wires are touching each other and they're touching the lug of the switch. And there's more, so scroll down. There's two more black with oranges here. Hidden passage and secret door target. So hidden passage should be the switch behind the upper flipper. Here's the upper flipper. So here it is right here. Black with orange. Mine just has one black with orange, so make sure that's there. And then the other one is the target. I think it said it was a secret door target. So this is the secret door target. And there are two black with oranges here. Both need to be firmly attached to the lug and they need to be touching each other. Okay, next we're gonna start looking into the issue where the ball's going into the dungeon and causing the game to kick out another ball. So since we already have the playfield up, here's a couple things we can just kind of look at and verify with the playfield up, and then I'm gonna have some other things to look at with the playfield down. So here's dungeon opto upper and dungeon opto lower. Those are the two switches involved with the dungeon. So the upper is gonna be wire colors tan orange going to black gray, and the lower is tan yellow going to black gray. Let's find those. So this is the dungeon. Here's one of the opto boards. So this is gonna be the one, this is the black-gray side. And if you look close, these are the two optos, those clear pieces. So there and there. So that's upper and that's lower. So I don't necessarily expect this is where the problem is, but while you're in here, just kind of look that yours looks about like mine and that there's no wires pinched. Sometimes when wires get pinched, it can trigger strange switch closures. But it looks like mine is just on this side, a connector just kind of going into the harness up here. It stays out of the way of the moving mechanism. It goes through the harness down to node board 9 down here. You don't necessarily have to really scrutinize the harness right now. That's usually the last place I look, but I usually just look for wires that are around the moving parts like this and see, hey, what if a wire got pinched here? That would explain our issue. But as you can see, mine is out of the way, so I doubt a wire got pinched. Let's look at the other side. So that's the top side. Optos are always in pairs. So this is the bottom side here. And this is where you'll see those tan wire colors. So here's tan yellow and tan orange. So that connector is plugged in. The wires are coming down here. They're going to the harness here, and then they're going to go down to the node board. Let's look at the node board. So you can see on the connector down here, we have two black gray wires on the left here. And then we have our tan wires. So I see tan with yellow here. And then let's see, tan with orange is connector 11, pin 4. So I already know this is connector 11. It is printed on the board. It's sometimes hard to see depending on the angle you're looking at. And I'm going to count from the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this should be tan orange. I imagine the orange stripe happens to be on the bottom. And yes, I can just make out the orange from this side. So that's tan with orange right there. So basically, make sure there's nothing weird looking with the wires going from your dungeon opto to the board. Like I said, I kind of doubt it. As long as they're routed out of the way of the moving mechanisms, it's pretty unlikely that they're pinched, but it's worth a look while you're under here. I'm going to tell you a couple of theories I can come up with for why, when a ball goes in here, is it shooting out another ball when it should not. Things that tell the game to shoot out another ball would be a switch that triggers the start of a multi-ball, a switch that triggers the ball save, or a trough switch. So in this case, my things I'm going to look at are the cube opto, because that can start a multi-ball. We already looked at the outlane switches, which can trigger a ball save, so another ball to be ejected if you were to drain out the outlane. And then the third thing is going to be the trough. But from this position, I'm going to start looking at the cube opto. So this is the cube. You could see a glimpse of one of the opto boards right here. We're going to look at it more with the playfield down. But while we have our playfield up, look at the wires that go through the playfield from the cube, and just make sure there's nothing crazy going on. So I know my opto wire color, so this happens to be one of the optos for the cube. I could tell because of the wire colors. And then the manual says the wire colors are going to involve tan with green. So make sure your wires look like they're in place. There's nothing pinched. There's nothing crazy going on, because a pinched wire or a broken wire means that a vibration can trigger a switch hit. So if one of these wires were broken or pinched and you go in the dungeon and it makes a big vibration, it can trigger a switch hit on the cube and it makes the game think, oh, I need to start a multi-ball, so it shoots a ball out. So that's why we're looking at stuff like this. This is not very common, but I have seen it happen. Okay, the other opto wire is going to be this one right here. So you got red with brown on one side, and then the other side is going to be those two black gray wires that are going to go to the node board. So just make sure nothing's disconnected and crazy with these two opto wires and connectors coming from the cube. And then we're also going to look at it from the top. I'm going to put the playfield down. Actually, let's keep it pulled forward so we can see the cube better. Next thing I want you to do is look at the wires for the cube opto, because the most likely place they're going to break off is going to be at these little opto boards here, because they require solder. So I realize it's kind of an awkward place. It's kind of between the cube and the rail, If a different playfield position helps you, that's fine. But, and maybe you could use, let's see. I'm gonna use my non-conductive multi-purpose pinball tool, otherwise known as a chopstick, to help point out things. And then kind of jiggle the wires a little bit. So basically you wanna make sure none of these wires are loose. You could spend a little more time with it than I am, but I'm just kind of generally showing you, check that those wires are not loose. If they are, then they can momentarily contact based on vibration and trigger a switch hit that you don't want. Let's look at the other side. This side is easier to see. But what's actually happening is the wire is wrapping through here and then it's soldered to the other side. So you can sometimes tell just by pulling on this side, see if a wire's loose. But if you start to suspect that one of these is the issue, it's probably worth a little further scrutiny. So what I would do is take these two screws out and be able to flip it around and really look at it better from the other side. For now, I'm just kind of pointing out where it is, and you could do some initial look and feel from this side, and if you need to, you can scrutinize it further. While you have the playfield in this position already and the game powered off, let's look at the trough. Make sure the connectors are all seated really good. For good measure, you can go ahead and reseat them. This used to be a more common problem, now it's an occasional problem. But if these connectors aren't seated good, it can cause trough problems, and it can cause the game to eject more than one ball when it's not supposed to. There we go. So there's that one, and this one. All right, let's get the playfield back down. And the being powered off, or sorry, powered on. For some additional testing. I'm gonna close the door so it can fully power up if it needs to. Okay, I'm gonna show you a quick, very useful test. It may look a little strange, but it has saved my life multiple times. I work on games on location. They're a lot more likely to need maintenance. And I've had multiple games in the past few weeks where there were like phantom switch closures, which is kind of what we're dealing with here, where a vibration somewhere triggers a switch somewhere else. And it can be a pain to track down, but here is a shortcut that works pretty well a lot of times. So I think this is a good position to try it. Let's open the door, pull the interlock switch, and this might really speed up the troubleshooting process. So let's enter the menu, enter again, down to diagnostics, enter, switch test, enter, and with this newer menu, we're gonna do enter, and then enter again for switch test with history, which is super helpful. Okay, so what I think might be happening with the customer game is the big vibration from the dungeon is triggering a switch somewhere else. So here's how you find something like that. You actually mimic the vibration by hitting the playfield with your fist. You see about how hard I'm hitting it? Enough to trigger vibration, you can see things shaking, but I'm not punching the game with all of my might. So listen and watch carefully as you do this and see if any switches are triggered. If you have a pinched or broken wire somewhere and it's momentarily making contact with the vibration, it will often show up in the test with this method. And notice I'm also moving around. I started here because that's where the vibration is happening in the customer game. We also could have a trough vibration issue, so I'm gonna do other areas that I can easily reach. I'll do near the cube. If you have a switch pop up here, that's gonna give us a shortcut. Say I do this and it triggers the cube opto. Okay, now we're gonna scrutinize the optos and wiring on the cube. Say I do this and it triggers a trough switch. Okay, we're gonna scrutinize that, and that may be why it's ejecting another ball. Same thing with an outlane switch. That's gonna tell us, oh, that's probably where the issue is, and we're gonna scrutinize those things. So this could be really useful. Let me know if that yields anything. Next, I'm gonna show you device-specific tests with the dungeon, cube, and trough. So let's start with the dungeon. So I'm gonna hit enter, enter, right red button down to device test, enter, right red button down to dungeon, enter. This is what it looks like. It says, okay, so press select to raise dungeon. So it momentarily raises it with the select button. And this is exactly what my screen is doing. Cool. All right, but if you want it to stay up or stay down, you can use the plus and minus. So the right red button and the left red button. I want it to stay up. So I'm gonna hit the right red button or the plus button. Nice, now I can test the actual opto. So when the ball goes into the dungeon, it uses the dungeon opto upper. So I'm gonna try it with my chopstick first. That's why you don't do it with your finger. I was afraid of that. Let me do it with a ball. All right, watching the screen and the device, I'm gonna put a ball in there. Okay. I kind of wish you could independently test the opto just a little bit more easily, but this is good enough. All right, so basically what I'm trying to show is when I put the ball in, this top one is going to be highlighted because the upper opto also senses the ball. There's only 2 optos, but there's 3 functions. There's up, down, and then is there a ball in there or not. But I noticed it uses this one to sense the ball as well. But it looks like in this test, and it timed out and went down. Let me hit the plus button again. Here's what happens in the test when you put a ball in. So momentarily, when I put the ball in, all 3 of those things are highlighted green, and then it starts to move and kick. So you can verify that yours is doing the same thing as mine. If it's not, there might be an issue with the dungeon opto. I'm not sure that that's the direction we're gonna end up going, but it's helpful to know how that test works. Next, I'm going to test the cube opto. So I'm gonna use the green button to go back, then left red button to go up to diagnostics, black button to enter, black button to enter switch test. Now, one of the reasons I'm scrutinizing the cube is A, because it can trigger a multi-ball. So that would explain why it's kicking another ball out. And B, look how close it is to dungeon opto upper and dungeon opto lower. Cube is right next to it, and it uses the same black-gray ground wire. So an issue with the cube opto could be related to the fact that you're putting the ball in the dungeon and the dungeon is moving. So here's how you test the cube opto. You drop the ball right here, and as it goes through, it says cube enter opto. So go ahead and do that a few times, make sure it's working reliably. If it's not working reliably, that could be a clue that the cube opto is involved here. While we're in switch test, let's just go ahead and verify that your outlanes are working correctly. So you roll over to the left, it says left outlane, and the right outlane. A problem with one of those switches could explain why it's serving an extra ball. And next, let's run a trough test. So I'm gonna use the green button to back out of switch test, back again. Right red button to go down to device test, black button to enter, then black button to enter ball trough test. It says this game uses 8 balls. That's a helpful reminder. Let's grab the balls. I'm gonna drop them in one by one and watch the screen. So that's the 5 in the main trough. You can hit enter to make it fire a ball, which kind of helps you test that the switches are working consistently and they're working with the vibration of the trough working. Run this as many times as you like. If I suspect a trough problem, I will Usually run it many times to see if it's consistently working like it should. Okay, since we're working with Dungeons and Dragons, we have another ball trough to deal with, and it's the dragon trough. So let's back out of the main ball trough test and go down to just dragon and hit enter. And this is what it should usually do. In this game state where I have 5 balls down here, I have the playfield down, there should be 3 balls in the dragon. Those are represented by those 3 yellow squares. It says, let's see, how do we, okay, press minus to fire a ball, that's the left red button. So notice after he fired a ball, there's now 2 balls in there. And let's go ahead and do our vibration test too. Actually, preferably do this with 3 balls in there. But on vibration, does it do anything to your dragon trough? If it does, then that can trigger strange behavior, because essentially, if it's not sensing the balls in here accurately, the game loses count of the balls and where they are, and that can cause the game to put an extra ball in the shooter lane when it should not. Feel free to test this as much as you want. And then the way I know it will reload is just to use the green button to back out to attract mode. And that tells it to reload the dragon. And then you can run your test again. Okay, I know this was somewhat long and complicated, but hopefully I covered a lot of ground here, a lot of theories, a lot of useful tests, and hopefully one of these will uncover what this unusual problem is, and I'm eager to hear back and see what you find. Let me know if I can help you further. Thank you.